I'm on a bit of a roll tonight. Like I said in one of the previous videos, I'm working through newspapers and various reports therein. It's just giving me ideas for videos here, so I'm gonna just make them as I go along. Um, the video I made about Taiwan and Pelosi's visit, there's probably a lot more I could have said about that, and that kind of exemplifies why I do make longer videos. Um, there's issues around that warrant more attention, of course. It's a huge story, so there's going to be a lot said on it. Beijing's response, China's response, has of course been these military drills and exercises which are violating international law. Um, but here's the thing about that. I'll just say this kind of conclusionary statement. I probably should have said in the video. Whether or not Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, I think the threat is still there. And I think that's how the Taiwanese see it. With or without her visit, um, the threat's there. And I think China would be threatening Taiwan regardless. Liz Truss, I'm pleased to see, has come out strongly in support of the visit and has said that the visit's very reasonable and China's antics are inflammatory. China's response to that is inflammatory. So, um, I've been listening to Duran Duran to totally change the subject. The great new romantic band of the 80s. They were from Birmingham, or they formed in Birmingham, I should say. And just with the closing ceremony of the Commonwealth Games in that city, they were performing in the closing festivities. So I thought, what the hell, I'll go out and buy a Duran Duran CD because it was a good price and I like some of their songs. Rio, let's see what else we have. Girls on Film, Planet Earth. I quite like that whole new romantic genre. But yeah, Duran Duran, great Birmingham band. Okay, the issue at hand. Alex Jones. I'm going to just read out a report from The Guardian. The other big story that's been covered in all the press is the killing of Amin al Zawahiri. I didn't make a video about that, and I won't because it is what it is. He was bin Laden's number two, taken out in a compound in Kabul, 71 years old. It didn't get as much attention as the killing of Baghdadi, and even less so than the killing of Osama bin Laden. Um, Make no mistake, though, he might have been 71 and ailing, but this guy has a lot of innocent blood on his hands. Um, he thought to actually have been the mastermind of 9/11. If bin Laden was a charismatic figure and the leader of Al Qaeda, it was Zawahiri that was in many ways the technical side behind it. So good riddance. Of course, it's going to be replaced by someone else, but it'll be a major morale blow to Islamists. So, good thing as far as I'm concerned. But it also shows that the Taliban in Afghanistan are still harboring terrorist groups. Anyway, conspiracy theorist Alex Jones admits Sandy Hook shooting was not a hoax. The report is not named, just says Associated Press Austin. I'm going to read this out, it's not too long. The conspiracy theorist Alex Jones said yesterday he understands it was irresponsible to declare the Sandy Hook school shooting a hoax and he now believes it was 100% real. He was speaking at his own defamation trial a day after the parents of a 6-year-old boy killed in the 2012 attack testified about the suffering, death threats, and harassment they endured because of what Jones trumpeted on his media platforms. It was, especially since I met the parents, it's 100% real, Jones said. At the trial, it will determine how much he owes for defaming the parents of Jesse Lewis, one of 20 children and 6 adults killed in December 2012 at the school in Newtown, Connecticut. On Tuesday, Lewis's parents said an apology would not be enough, and the Infowars host needed to be held accountable for spreading falsehoods about the attack. They're seeking at least $150 million. Closing arguments were expected to begin after more testimony from Jones, who has portrayed the lawsuit as an attack on his First Amendment rights. We'll come back to that in a second. He is the only person testifying in defense of himself and his media company, Free Speech Systems. Jones' attorney asked if he now understood it was absolutely irresponsible to push the false claim that the massacre didn't happen. Jones's attorney, that's his own attorney. Jones said he did, but added, the media won't let me take it back. He said he was typecast as someone that runs around talking about Sandy Hook, makes money off Sandy Hook, is obsessed by Sandy Hook. What what an absolute egoist. The parents, Neil Heslin and Scarlett Lewis, testified that Jones and the false claims he pushed through his Infowars website made their lives a living hell. Alex started this fight, Heslin said, and I'll finish this fight. The judge scolded Jones for not being truthful under oath when he told the jury he had complied with pre-trial evidence gathering and that he was bankrupt. I think he should be held in court for that. This is not your show, Judge Mayekar Gamble told Jones. Your beliefs do not make something true. You're under oath. Last September, the judge admonished Jones in her default judgment over his failure to turn over documents requested by the Sandy Hook families. Free speech systems filed for federal bankruptcy protection last week. Sandy Hook families have separately sued Jones over his financial claims, arguing that the company is trying to protect millions owed by Jones and his family through shell entities. I hope they bankrupt the bastard. I'm not going to equivocate here. I think Alex Jones is a scumbag, an absolute scumbag. And I think those fools who support this, I mean, here's the thing: when you get someone like Alex Jones, and this is why I think certain forms of conspiracy theory could be very dangerous. Well, look at QAnon. I've always thought that Alex Jones was a very shady character. I mean, this is one of the things he became famous for. He's well known for a lot of things. His angry rants, his bizarre connections with things that have, well, he needs no introduction. But the thing is, it's easy to laugh at someone like Alex Jones. It's easy to dismiss him as a nut. What's more troubling is the fact that there's an alarming number of people who get taken in by the likes of Alex Jones. I'd compare him to a cult leader. I would actually compare him to a cult leader. He might be a shock jock, but I think he's no different from another Jones, the Jones of Jonestown fame. Um, um, David, I think he was called David Jones back in 1978. Forget his name now, but yeah, famous cult leader in the late 70s. I think there's no difference. And in fact, it's probably worse because back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, cult figures, dangerous as they were, could only reach out to their followers by having them at camps or retreats or you name it. I think what's particularly dangerous about someone like Alex Jones is the internet, is the radio. Now the radio's always existed, but now it's compounded by the internet. And this First Amendment argument, it's one thing about the United States which I think is interesting, whereby the First Amendment is so widely thrown around. Like, I'm harassing this family, I'm terrorizing them, basically, by stoking up hatred against them. This is a grieving family who's lost their child in a massacre, but hey, my free speech is what matters. Um, that's where I think American free speech, the notion of it, the way it's often weaponized, can be absolutely toxic. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for free speech, but I think when you're deliberately seeking to hurt someone else, then it gets into a question about responsibility. Now, Jones is a piece of shit. Um, why he does his stuff, whether he genuinely believes it, whether he is just an egoist, I don't really know what his motivation is. I think some of it is that he believes this nonsense. If you don't know what I'm talking about, if you don't know what this refers to, basically he argues that mass shootings like Sandy Hook were an inside job, or they were staged. And you get this term crisis actors. Same thing happened after the Parkland atrocity. You get certain conservative Americans who tap into this conspiracy nonsense because they want to find some explanation to oppose common sense gun control. So if they present it as the big wicked government trying to take away their guns, then they try to tap in the narrative, which is, well, these events are staged to make the gun lobby look bad. Now, I think insulting and vilifying people who have lost their children in an atrocity like this is just about as low as you can get. I think that the people harassing those families, they're as scummy as Alex Jones is. Um, and it just makes me sick, to be quite honest. The United States seems to have a lot of people that tap into this stuff, and it's troubling. This is why, when that whole thing was going on with Elon Musk on Twitter, there's a question about free speech absolutism, which I think needs to be addressed. Now, in Western democracy, in liberal democracies, free speech is one of the absolute hallmarks of that, right? And that's a no-brainer because it gets down to matters of conscience. But I do think that free speech absolutism utterly disregards the harm that can be caused by blindingly spouting out lies and blindingly spouting out hate. Free speech absolutists are being very naive if they think that it's harmless. Free speech absolutists would do well to look at a case like this. Consider what Jones has put those families through by instigating hate against them, by instigating lies against them. I mean, the fact that he'll probably slink back to his what remnants are left of his enterprises and tell his supporters that he's a victim of the system, that he only apologized because he had to. He's a piece of shit. I really do think he's a despicable human being. Um, because he is causing so much pain to people. Um, so when people have this free speech absolutism, they're ignoring the fact that, I'll give an example. During the Rwanda Genocide, there were radio stations operated by Hutu power militias. Some of them actually had foreign sources. One of them was a Belgian national, which I only found out actually a few years ago. I was aware that these stations existed, but I was shocked to learn that one of them was actually a Belgian national, not even a ethnic Rwandan. Um, but basically, they stirred up hatred on the airwaves in the mid 1990s, leading up to the genocide, where they would use euphemisms such as "we need to cut the tall trees down." We need to cut the tall trees down. And that was a reference to the fact that Tutsis were thought to be taller on average. To cut the tall trees down, they referred to them as cockroaches, and there was all this hateful, dehumanizing language, and it was directly used to basically incite genocide. When the president was killed in a plane crash along with Burundi's president, the Tutsis were blamed for this, and these Hutu power radio stations really, really poured petrol on the flames. And they were largely responsible for the scale of violence that ensued. There were a lot of reasons as to why that happened. That was definitely one of them. So when people say absolute free speech is harmless, or there should be absolutely no limits on what people say, I have a problem with that because I don't think people should have freedom to, for example, incite blind threats. I think that powerful people who spread lies, like Donald Trump and Alex Jones, and I do consider Jones powerful because he has a big base. You know, these people love to present themselves as underdogs. That is a classic trick that conspiracy nuts like Jones utilize. Like he's just a common man standing up against the system. The truth is, he's a very wealthy man who has very craftily manipulated his listeners. Um, I mean, like I say, it's easy to dismiss him as a wild man, as this ranter, because he's not coherent. He's not an eloquent figure, but clearly he has done something quite effective. I'm pleased he's going bankrupt, and I hope he absolutely loses his influence. But you can be sure that there'll be people out there who will be saying, "Oh, he's a victim. They're trying to silence him." When conspiracy theorists, this thing about conspiracy theorists, right? I know the argument. Oh, but you're a sheep. Your fault. You believe everything the mainstream media says and what the government says. That's not my position, and I've always said it's healthy to question power. And sure, the mainstream media has many flaws, sometimes even corruption. There are examples, for example, on how the BBC and CNN report things, I have a big problem with. And I am 100% behind criticizing mainstream media. But the danger becomes when conspiracy types don't question their own sources. This is the thing, they won't apply their own rules. Actually, I believe one of my subscribers made that point. They don't apply their own rules. So, for example, they'll say, "Oh, but you need to think independently. Don't believe everything the mainstream media is telling you. Think for yourself." But then we all get our information from somewhere. So my question to them would be, well, where are you getting your information from? And how do you know that your source isn't flawed? That's the biggest problem with conspiracy theorists. They don't have the humility to question their own sources. They don't have the humility to step back and think, well, maybe I'm being naive. Because they're so confident that the rest of us are idiots, that the rest of us are sheep. I think in America this is a very serious problem because we've seen this with QAnon and some of the far right types and others who attacked the Capitol last year. Call it an insurrection or riot, but whatever the case, it was a very serious thing. I don't agree with those on the right who try to downplay it. I think it was a very serious incident. And I think these people are very dangerous. Um, the anti-vax crowd. I mean, my position would be you've a right to your opinion, and I get the argument about body sovereignty, and I'm even on board with that. I do think there's a fundamental right to say it's my body, my choice. Where I draw a line is when they're actively spreading falsehoods, when they're actively scaremongering this idea that the world billionaire elite want to control the population, and they're putting microchips into your skin and all the rest of it. They, of course, ignore the fact that millions of people have taken vaccines and there's been no side effects or minimal side effects. Vaccines have saved lives. Look at smallpox, look at polio. So I think it is not only irresponsible and dishonest, I think it's very selfish to knowingly spread lies about stuff like that, or even if not knowingly, to not stop back for a second and think, well, wait a second, what about the other side of this? This has saved lives because they have an answer for everything. You say, well, vaccines have saved millions of people. Oh, but look at this case. So what they'll do, it'll magnify a case where you maybe have someone who died after taking the vaccine, which is a tragedy. But they will they will home in on that and make that into something bigger than it is. Now, there might be different reasons why that happened. I'm not saying that you can never, that there's no corruption in power. I'm not saying that every conspiracy theory is nonsense. I think there are some events in history, recent history, where there are definitely unexplained things. No question about it. But the big problem I have with a certain kind of conspiracy theorists, like Alex Jones, is when they go to the point not just of questioning power, but when they're callously insulting victims of terrorist attacks, of mass shootings, of other tragedies. I mean, those who would insult 9/11 victims by saying that there was nobody on the planes or that the planes were all actors. They want to insult people like Betty Ong, the courageous flight attendant. Why? Because she showed composure. Um, that's why I have such contempt for them because I think that they're callous in their own arrogance and their own inability to sort of check their own sources. They don't seem to care about the pain and hurt that they are causing the relatives of these sort of tragedies. It's one thing saying, well, this doesn't quite add up. What's the government hiding? That's a legitimate enough question. But when you go into the point of insulting the survivors or the families of something, I think to me, that is beyond despicable. Beyond despicable. I'm going to wrap this up. It's a bit longer than I intended, but yeah, I'm pleased Jones has had to cough up. I hope he goes bankrupt. He's no one to blame but himself. And I think the court should have actually, whatever the American equivalent is of contempt of court, if he lied under oath, that should be added to his offences. Free speech is sacrosanct. I think we should have the right to be offensive within reason. I mean, who gets to determine what is offensive? But I think if there is evidence that you're actually hurting people to the point where they're getting death threats and harassment, when you're being inflammatory to that point, when you're stoking up hatred against a group of people, I think that free speech absolutism definitely has to be questioned. And to those who say free speech is absolute, I draw them to that Rwanda example. What's your answer to that? Do people not have responsibility over their own words? Because this is the big thing with free speech. It also comes with responsibility. In these videos, I know I'm responsible for every syllable I utter. That's why I always say if I make a mistake about something and someone draws my attention to that, I will amend it. Never deliberate, but I will do that. People are responsible for their own words. And I'm pleased that Jones has been made an example of. And if you're stupid enough to believe what he's saying, if you're callous enough to insult victims of tragedy, one last thing on this actually. Years ago, back in 2014-15, I because this just taps into how much people could be sucked into this sort of stuff. I defended a Thai woman. Um, she goes by various aliases, and to cut a long story short, she was a Republican in the sense that she was very vocal against the Thai monarchy. Now, in Thailand, that's a very risky thing to be because it's illegal to criticize the monarchy there. They have notoriously harsh lèse-majesté laws. Anyway, at the time, she fled Thailand because she was getting death threats. She came to the UK. Now, whilst in the UK, whilst in London, she got harassment from Thai royalists living in the UK. And there was police procedures, there was criminal actions taken, but I made a video defending her at that time. Now, I don't regret anything I've done. It was a principle of freedom of expression I was defending. Um, I hadn't seen her make any threats. I was defending her right to freedom of speech, and I stand by that 100%. But and I became friends with her online. I disconnected from her about a year ago because, no, it wouldn't have been that long ago actually, about 6 months ago, because I was utterly disgusted by the fact that she started promoting conspiracy theories to the point of, for example, anti-vax stuff, but more reprehensible in my view, she started promoting pro-Putin posts and basically spreading lies about the situation in Ukraine and spreading Putinist propaganda. And I was so disgusted by this because I'm thinking, you've come to the UK, this country has given you refuge. And Rose Amanpour, if you happen to see this, what that path that you went down was absolutely reprehensible. I'm not going to remove those older videos defending you, but this woman, for her to go down that line, and I told her, so I was upfront about it. I told her that I no longer want to be connected to someone who, yeah, went down this line. And the point is, some this is the danger with conspiracy theorists. Someone who is a decent person, who's noble, who's for human rights and so on, can go down that rabbit hole. Someone who's intelligent can go down that rabbit hole. Families have seen it's almost like a cult, and that's why I despise these sort of sinkholes, which brings people into the gutter, where they start exploring and exploring, but they never question their own sources. They never ask, is there common sense going on here? And I won't pretend that I know one of my subscribers is of this persuasion. He might be watching this. Boys, Boys Pride, or I forget your exact username. I'm sure you'll have something to say about this video. But maybe you can address this question. Do you support Alex Jones? Do you support his callous insulting of the victims of Sandy Hook? My example with Rhodes, I'm in Port Roads, that you can see this happening. You can see people who outwardly seem to be decent people and seem to be intelligent just go down the sinkhole and go into the gutter, and it's depressing. It's concerning. Then when they start spreading, I mean, to be honest, the internet is a trough of toxicity and manure because people then get taken in by this crap. And the thing is, it's not just opinions; it has real world consequences. You know, that's why I do think social media platforms are right to censor certain things, and I'll make another video about that soon enough. But they should be more consistent in how they do this. Okay, let me know your thoughts.